Okay, so does anybody in here know what ADHD is? Okay. Does anybody know what hyperfocus associated with ADHD is? Good deal. I was like, cool, I'm so happy about that. So, the ones that do know, do you guys know what it's like? Okay, so an example for me on a bad day, this goes into the rest of it. The last song that's on the radio, so let's say Garth Brooks is on, is playing, so I'm like listening to a song. Then the constant tapping, but you can't shake your leg because then your neighbor probably thinks you're tweaking or something. So you have to tap whatever's next to you quietly, but it can't be the pin tapping or the pin clicking because that's irritating. So you're tapping while listening to Garth Brooks, while trying not to get distracted by the snow that's falling, while listening to a lecture about signal phrases. And for some reason you have to solve a math problem the way you did the day before. That's what it was on a really bad day for me. When the teacher would ask a question, what do you think about signal phrases, and trying to give your opinion, it's difficult when you have all this stuff going on. My poor teacher dealt with me so much. She asked me, what do you think about signal phrases? So I said signal phrases are important because, and they paused and I was like, well, I forgot the question. So I mean, it is funny, but he has to repeat it, so then I have to get all these words out of my mouth to be able to participate in class and get points while listening to Garth Brooks, while tapping, while figuring out a math problem, while trying not to get distracted by the snow. So this is just my personal experience with ADHD. Now, the abbreviation for ADHD is Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder. And it is defined as the frontal lobe and a neurological disorder that impacts the way that young children and adults think. Now, the purpose of this presentation is to inform you guys that there are other mental disorders other than like depression or anxiety. This is something that's not really constantly discussed, but it is something that does exist and it is something that happens. Now, according to my anatomy and physiology book, the association areas of the frontal lobe provide higher intellectual processes, such as concentrating, planning, complex problem solving, control emotional behavior, and will produce awareness of consequences of the behavior. So what that means is that the frontal lobe, which is right here in our brains, is underdeveloped and it's smaller in size, so that way we're not able to fully comprehend everything that's going on, which is why we have all this stuff happening, and well, it's part of underdevelopment. Some of the neurotransmitters that are associated with ADHD are norepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin. Excuse me. Now, norepinephrine acts as a hormone, and it assists with stress, and it can affect the attention, and it helps people pay attention and focus in their daily lives. Lower levels of the norepinephrine are in the brain that make it harder to focus, and that's why it's one of the why they believe that's one of the causes of ADHD. Serotonin is another neurotransmitter that's in the body, and it's helped to regulate mood and social behavior, appetite, digestion, and sleep and memory. Now there's a little discussion how serotonin and depression might be linked together. Low doses of serotonin are associated with depression, but you can get natural serotonin by just like going out to the gym and working out. And the other neurotransmitter associated with ADHD is dopamine, and it helps us regulate emotional responses, and it takes action to achieve specific rewards. So like feelings of pleasure, satisfaction, feeling overall good about yourself. Now, according to my psychology book, ADHD, like to be diagnosed with it, you have to have one or all three of these things, which is inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. I think with me personally, I do act on my impulses unintentionally. I don't mean to say what I say until after I say it, and I was like, wow, that was really offensive. So actually I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was really young, but as of recently I got re-diagnosed again here at United Tribes. But those are some of the criteria that's associated. Actually, there's other testing that they do at the hospital. I'm not going to get too much off topic about it because it's relevant, but not like as relevant. But some of the causes, stats, and reasonings why people have ADHD. And well, one of the things is according to the Center for Disease and Control Prevention, 13.2% of the U.S. boys have ADHD, and 5% or 5.6% of girls are diagnosed with ADHD. Causes are not completely known, however, they do believe it is hereditary. So it means you can get it from like your parents, or they're even doing studies to see if there's a possibility of cigarettes being a cause of ADHD, as well as alcohol, high levels of stress, and low birth rates, excuse me. And another thing that people like to talk about is whether you want to do it naturally or if you want to take medicine. Some of the two major medications that are associated with ADHD are Ritalin and Adderall. And it's supposed to help like instantly. But then if you just want a norepinephrine retake, which is something that's non-addictive, you can take Strattera. As for natural, which is what I've been doing, I use a lot of talk therapy. I have zero self-control, and I will explain my whole life story to you. But it helps me release a lot of that built-up energy that I have and how I like just talk, and it makes it better for me. Or another thing you can use is coffee, is because coffee acts as a stimulant. So before I would go to class, so I wouldn't get days like this, I would drink a cup of coffee at 7 o'clock. But I'd drink a cup and a half, so that way I was able to be regulated, and I could actually focus and pay attention to a lot of the lectures that are going on. Not with just my first class, but with all of them. So ADHD is a very real mental disorder. There are different brain developmental things that can happen within the frontal lobe and the neurotransmitters. It is hereditary. I believe I got it from my mom or my dad. And when it boils down to it, you can do what you feel is best for you, whether it's taking medication or just taking care of it naturally. That's it.